Hey guys, back with another episode here. Just out on a solid evening cruise. Just doing a quick one around the lake just to shoot this episode, but awesome night for it. I've been playing around with like a whole bunch of settings trying to figure out YouTube here. This is why I've had like quite a bit of delays in this whole process of trying to shoot this stuff and make these videos. I've been uploading to YouTube and noticing that the compression has been just making my videos look like absolute garbage, even though everything's shot in high resolution. I did find out the proper format, proper settings and everything, and export settings, all of that stuff, and it still wasn't looking great. I think I got it figured out now. If it looks like garbage on your phone, especially, like it looks pretty decent on a computer it seems, but on your phone, most of our settings are defaulted to just auto as for video quality and resolution. So it basically is just going to take your whatever your current data is at. So if you don't have very good reception where you're at, it's going to be low data, and it's going to try and basically knock the video down to like really low resolution. It's going to look like garbage. So you can change that setting in the actual app setting to make sure that it's always viewing on highest resolution, highest picture quality. And it should look a lot better when you do that. You can also adjust that so that when it's on Wi-Fi, it only does it well on Wi-Fi if you don't want to burn up all your data when you're watching YouTube, when you're away from home or whatever. So anyways, just a note on that. If it looks like garbage, that's kind of why. I think everything else on my end is all sorted out. So, but yeah, anyway, I want to get into this one here. The thought on this one came from a comment I actually came across on like personal development coaches, one of his posts. There was a guy who commented on it, and basically his projection is he seems troubled or seems very angry, and I kind of wanted to talk about this. There's a few things in this that I'm going to touch on, but essentially these types that I'm talking about, these coaches or motivational influencers, whatever you want to characterize them or label them as, they come across with like a very intense demeanor, right? Or, you know, it seems aggressive. And like I said, this guy in particular saw it as he almost was angry. And I want to talk about, you know, kind of where this probably originates from to kind of help people like him understand, and also the pros of it. And then also a big consideration at the end, just from my own personal experience with this, that I think is important to consider in all of this, because I do think there's a lot of pros in the approaches that these influencers or coaches use, but I also think that there could be a potential con as well. First of all, I think it's important to understand that these types of influencers, coaches, they do it as a way as essentially coming across as an authoritative figure, right? So, you know, when you're online, and especially if you're in motivation and you're coaching and, you know, you're trying to sell something, you need people to respect you. And in a way, you command that by coming across very confident or very sure in what you're selling or what you're talking about. And some people just do it in a very intense way, and part of the strategy of marketing themselves, right? So the other thing to consider too is essentially what they're doing is they're trying to provoke an anger within their followers or whoever's viewing their videos. They're trying to provoke that anger inside of them that they may have towards themselves, or a version of themselves that they completely despise or are resenting. And they do that as a strategy to provoke that anger so that they can basically get you to use that anger as fuel. We all know that anger is very motivating emotion, and that's what these guys kind of go off of, right? And just to be clear, like to give some examples, you know, anybody who is in the personal development world or appreciates a lot of that content and motivation and follow these types of people know who I'm talking about when I say a David Goggins type character, or locally here there's Cole Da Silva, or I think one of the biggest OGs in this niche, if you want to call it that, was Andy Frisella. So these guys just have a more aggressive approach in their messaging, and it's an intense projection, I guess, or it can be perceived as such. And I believe that these guys, and I mean, some of them even, told their story and said that for a fact this is the case, it all originated with them being angry with themselves and a version of themselves that they were completely sick and tired of. And after year, they got sick of their excuses and running the same routines and the old patterns and old behaviors, getting them nowhere, building this resentment, this frustration towards themselves, until one day it boiled to this intense anger. And that anger just happened to be the thing that they needed to finally take action in the opposite direction of what they were doing and going the right way they wanted to go, and finally doing something about all the things that they weren't content with. So I think that that's essentially where this also originates. Now, I think it's important to also realize that it's a good thing. Like, it's useful, and it is a good strategy to use. However, I think what can happen is you can also establish an association with anger equaling fuel, equaling intensity, motivation, which equals results. And so you form this positive association around it. And in a way, you kind of embody this anger that you had, and you use it strategically. I know for myself, like, I use this. This just organically came when I was sorting through a lot of my grief, when I was going through a lot of grieving. I'd find myself, fluctuating. Two of the major grief stages is sadness and then anger. And those ones I really fluctuated back and forth on. But when I was sad, I just wanted to escape. I just wanted to sleep or use substances to escape, and obviously completely unproductive. And so what I would do is I would realize that when I'm angry, I would be a lot more motivated. And so when that emotion came, I'd get excited. And a lot of people have this association around anger as it's destructive, or it's tied to a destructive behavior, right? However, if you use it intentionally and strategically, like a lot of these coaches and influencers essentially are promoting, it can be a positive thing. And so I ended up having that association. So what I did is I learned that you can flip states from one that's unproductive to one that's constructive. When I was sad and low, I would end up thinking about the guy who caused this grief that I was going through, and it immediately flipped my state from sadness to anger. I would take that anger and I would take it to the gym, and I would use it constructively to build strength and build a body that essentially I respected, and it built a lot of self-respect for myself, and there's a lot of positive stuff to it. But I think a major consideration with all of this is I ended up embodying that. I saw it as such a positive thing, and I relied on the anger so much myself that I essentially just became a perpetually angry person. And even if I wasn't necessarily angry in that current moment, I still had it behind me. I embodied that anger because it was my fuel, and it made me come across as a very intense person. And the thing with the emotion of anger is it is draining. It's a draining emotion energy-wise. And obviously you become kind of unpleasant to be around if you come across as this really hard, intense person all the time. So what I ended up realizing was necessary was, even though it was great to use that initial anger as fuel and motivation in order to get the ball rolling, to start taking actions, create new behaviors, create new routines and rituals, I needed to learn how to not depend on it, not rely on it. One thing that I learned also is that once you establish this idea that anger equals results or intensity and motivation, and you hang on to it, there's a subconscious fear that also happens where you essentially are thinking, well, if I lose this anger, I might slip back into that person who I was, who I finally got so far away from after being that person I had no respect for so long. And so that's a thing that you end up just hanging on to. You hang on to that thing that worked for you. But again, it's a very draining emotion. and it's just not sustainable. So what I learned is you kind of have two options. You either learn how to turn it on and off, like be able to turn it on when you need it, and then turn it off when you're around your family, when you're around your friends, around your coworkers. But for me, I found that was really hard to do. That was a hard strategy. So what I ended up realizing was a lot easier, more sustainable approach was to actually just shift my focus and my dependence from the anger more into the routines and the discipline that I had built when I did have the anger. And, you know, you do eventually feel like, well, there was more motivation in the anger. Like once you let it go, you almost miss the anger in a way. But that is just a perception, because the other thing you'll realize is that once you actually let go of that anger, like I said, it's very depleting energy-wise. So once you get rid of it, you actually have more energy to put into your disciplines and your routines, your rituals that you had created. Anyways, guys, just something I thought about. Like I said, I read that comment and I just thought maybe some people might find it useful to have some understanding of, you know, where these characters kind of developed and where they originated, and the power of the strategies in which they use, and that they are positive. Like, you know, I have followed those people for quite a while as well, and every once in a while I like getting fired up from, you know, the way they project their messages. But I think it's just important to understand that to maintain that character, some of it is very much just part of their demeanor, part of their character that they had to create as part of their brand as well. And I highly doubt that they hang on to that every single day. I would imagine that they probably learn the same things that I learned. Even if they didn't, I just think it's important for others to understand that it's just not sustainable, and a more sustainable approach is definitely one where you use it initially and then eventually taper off of it and then focus on those other things like I mentioned. So anyways, guys, this one's just a quick one. Hope it provokes some thought on this topic, and thanks for coming for the ride. Catch you on the next one.